Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the Q&A session, you may press star one on your touch-tone phone if you would like to ask a question. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I would like to turn your meeting over to Ms. Anna Staton. Ms. Staton, you may begin.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, and welcome to today's FDA webinar on the Global Unique Device Identification Database, or as we call it, GUDID Device Identifier Module. I'm Anna Staton, a Communication Project Manager in CDRH's Office of Communication and Education. The FDA is committed to facilitating labelers' submissions of high-quality data to the GUDID. As part of these facilitation efforts, we have invited Class 3 device labelers to participate in this webinar today, which will describe the Device Identifier, or DI, module of the GUDID. Specifically, the webinar will help labelers understand the key characteristics, features, and business rules that apply to submitting DI records to the GUDID. We have with us today two center experts on UDI, both from the Office of Surveillance and Biometrics. We have Anita Rayner, our Acting Associate Director of Informatics and the CDRH Lead for UDI. And we have Indira Kunduri, our GUDID Project Manager. Following Indira's presentation, we'll open the line for questions. Please note this session will be recorded and posted to CDRH Learn for future reference. Now I'd like to turn it over to Indira.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the GUDID Device Identifier record. Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. We have a lot to cover, so the topic is the DI record, the Device Identifier record. We will talk about key concepts of the DI record, the DI record lifecycle, how packages play into GUDID DI records, and editing DI records. At the end, we will do a show and tell where we will log into the GUDID web interface and walk you through the device identifier record and touch upon some of the concepts that we would discuss during the presentation, and then take your questions and answers. So to start off very quickly, the Unique Device Identification System, Congress gave the statutory authority to the FDA in 2007 via the FDA Amendments Act to establish a UDI system. And in 2012, the FDASIA, FDA Safety and Innovation Act, established timelines for implementation of the UDI system. 2012, we came out with the UDI proposed rule, and in 2013, we issued the final rule. And if you were to visit the CDRH Learn website, you will see several helpful training webinars that are available for you, the UDI final rule, the GUDID Overview, and the webinar on GUDID accounts. Ideally, you would have either viewed or are familiar with all the concepts that have been covered in these three webinars that are on this slide prior to attending and listening to today's webinar, because that background is essential for you to follow what will be covered today. So if you haven't done that, just bear that in mind as you listen to today's webinar, and perhaps you can go back to listen to those and then revisit the recording that will be posted for today's webinar. The next slide, I show you just the compliance dates for all the devices that must bear a UDI on the label and have data submitted to GUDID. They're all on September 24th, and on the left-hand side, you will see the dates coming in over the next few years. The date we're all working towards at the moment, of course, is the one highlighted, September 24th of 2014, when all Class 3 devices and devices licensed under the Public Health Service Act need to have a UDI and must have the data submitted to GUDID. So what is UDI? Hopefully all of you know by now. UDI stands for Unique Device Identifier. It's composed of the device identifier portion and a production identifier component. The DI stands for device identifier, and it is basically a static portion of the UDI. It identifies a specific portion or a model of the device and the labeler for that device. The PI is a dynamic portion and can be composed of one or more of the 5 items listed on the slide: lot or batch number, serial number, expiration date, manufacturing date, and for human cellular and tissue-based products, the distinct identification code. Now, the GUDID, you'll hear this a lot. The GUDID stands for the Global Unique Device Identification Database. It's a repository of key device identification information. So in the GUDID, we only contain the static portion of the UDI, the device identifier portion. Production identifiers are not submitted, not are stored in the GUDID. However, we do capture information about which production identifiers are on the label. So if on the device label there is lot number on the device label, then in GUDID you would let us know that the production identifier that this device is on the device label is the lot number. You will answer yes or no to that question. The next slide here shows you a pictorial overview of GUDID. On the top left-hand side, you see in the blue 2 GUDID submission options. These are the 2 options that labelers of devices have open to them to submit information to GUDID. One is the GUDID web interface, where labelers can get GUDID accounts, log in, and in a secure fashion enter device information. The other option is a file submission option, where XML files can be submitted containing device identification information, and we use the HL7 SPL submission format to receive those. On the right-hand side is the pink box that talks about GUDID search and retrieval options. Again, there are 2 options. One is public users can access the GUDID web interface and retrieve and search for device information. And we have 2 capabilities which we are currently working on providing. One is web services, another one is download capability for GUDID data. I also would like to mention at the moment the GUDID search and retrieval options are disabled, mainly because the GUDID is still being populated and there are not enough records for anyone to search and retrieve information from. Therefore, once there are enough records, we will be opening up public search capability for GUDID. So at the moment, this has been disabled, and the focus of today's presentation is only going to be on the submission of information, so it's geared to the labelers of device information, and we'll go into in-depth about the device identifier specifically. So let's talk about the device identifier then, and to start off, a DI record, which is just a device identifier record that will be stored in GUDID for a given device, is composed of the device identifier, that's the primary key, and the other GUDID attributes. And I've listed on this slide some of the GUDID attributes, and the point to note is majority of the GUDID attributes come from the device label or the labeling of the device, and you can think of GUDID attributes as a subset of what might be in a label or labeling of a device. So just to point out a few obvious ones, here is the brand name, GMD and description could be potentially on the device, catalog number, production identifier, lot number. So here you see the lot number on the label. In GUDID, you wouldn't actually provide us this lot number. If you recall, we do not store PIs in GUDID. However, you would answer yes. And when we ask you the question, production identifier on the label for lot number, you would say yes, it is the lot number on the label. Similarly here, for expiration date, you would answer yes. You would not provide us the actual expiration date. Single use, labeler name and labeler physical address, and here's customer contact information. This is information that consumers may call to get more information about a device. Here's the actual UDI, and again, we only collect the DI, not the PI. Storage and handling, device count indicates how many of a device in a given package, and then the size information. So moving on, in the GUDID, the DI record, if you recall, we mentioned 2 submission options. There is the web interface option, and then there is the HL7 SPL option. The web interface option is the secure web interface web application where labelers will get GUDID accounts. Refer to the accounts webinar for more information on this. So you would obtain login as a labeler data entry user, an LDE user, and those LDE users are the ones who would be logging into GUDID to enter DI records. In the HL7 STL option, we will have a recording of HL7 STL option and the details of the process associated with that on the CDRH Learn website also for your use. HL7 stands for Health Level 7. STL stands for Structured Product Labeling. It's basically a standardized way for us to obtain device information as XML files. And all the information to submit this is on the GUDID website. You can visit and download it for your use. So coming back to GUDID and the DI record, so there are two ways to submit information, and a lot of what we'll be talking about will be applicable to both the options, but most of the screenshots and information and the show and tell I'll show you will be centered around the web interface. When there are differences between the two to note, we will draw those out for you. If not, if we don't draw those out, assume that the information presented is applicable to both submission options. So on the GUDID DI record, when you log in as an LDE user, you will see the device information split into three different panels. There is a device information panel, device status panel, and device characteristics panel. I'm just going to take a few minutes to walk you through each of those panels and show you the attributes. The device information panel obviously gives you key device identification information. Issuing agency is issuing agency for the organizations that operate a international standards-based system to issue UDI. So what the issuing agencies do is they have come up with a system to assign and maintain UDIs, and you as a labeler would have to choose which FDA-accredited issuing agency you would like to utilize for identification of your devices. Presently, there are three to choose from that the FDA has accredited. There is the HIBIC, which you are seeing on the screen. There is GS1, and then ICBA. Those are the three issuing agencies. And based on their system, you would assign and maintain UDIs for your devices. So you would specify that here. Primary DI number is the key. This is the device identifier that forms the base record in GUDID. Device count tells us how many devices are in the base package. Unit of use DI number, if you have multiples in a base package, an example might be a package of blood collection tubes. There may be 100, and if the package has a primary DI and you put a device count of 100, then the unit of use DI is a virtual DI. This would be used to associate the use of the device on the patient. Labeler DUNS number specifies the labeler, who is the labeler responsible for UDI submission requirements for this device. That's what you specify. The company name and address are put from the DUNS database, and brand name, version or model, catalog number are specified here, followed by device description. Now, looking down at the bottom of the screen, you see published date. This is a very important date in the GUDID database, so remember this, and we'll come back to this. This basically allows you, the labeler, to specify when a record can be made publicly available. The commercial distribution end date is when you specify or when you let us know that the device is no longer being commercially distributed, and this status is auto-populated based on the date. So if there is no date, we are going to status this as it is in commercial distribution. If you put an end date, then on that end date, the status will change to not in commercial distribution. So moving along to device information, alternative and additional identifiers. So here you get to tell us about if the device is subject to direct marking. So if your device is subject to direct marking, that it is exempt based on 801.45, you would mark that here. If not, this is not applicable to you. You don't need to worry about this field at all. If you have a direct marking DI and it's different from the primary DI, you would check that box and then you would tell us what the DI is here. Devices can have additional DIs from other issuing agencies, but remember, only one DI from a given issuing agency should be chosen as a primary DI. Everything else is considered secondary, and you would let us know what those secondary DIs are here. Package DI. Now, if you have packages which come off of your base package, they don't get a separate DI record also themselves. They are children, if you will, of the base package. They inherit all the attributes of the main DI record. All you tell us here is the attributes specific to a given package. We will talk about this further in the presentation. So in this case, here you have a package DI number, and you tell us the quantity that is in the package. And then you tell us what is inside this package, how many of the 10. So we are saying there are 10 of WS package 1 inside this package, and the package type and the fact that it is in commercial distribution. We will talk about this a little more later in the presentation. Customer contact, we talked about customer contact as being the contact information that consumers can use to get more information about the device. Now we move on to device status. This contains a little bit of regulatory information. We start off by asking you whether the device is a human cell, tissue, or cellular or tissue-based product, whether it's a kit product or a combination product. Is the device exempt from pre-market submission? If it's not, please provide us the pre-market submission number and the appropriate supplement number. For supplement numbers, you do not need to provide the S. You just provide us the actual number. We append the S on the back end. Product code, you provide us the product code for the device. FDA listing number. Every device record in GUDID must have an associated listing number unless it's a kit product. So make sure you take the time to identify listing number for your records. And GMDN. GMDN stands for Global Medical Device Nomenclature. It's a way to categorize devices at a very high level, helps for aggregation and analysis purposes. It's a level above the product code, FDA product code, if you will, to group devices that are similar. The GMDN agency has product codes. The GMDN agency has GMDN codes that you can obtain and populate the GUDID. But we've also made provisions for you to look for, to search for a preferred term and enter that code, FDA preferred term code, in place of GMDN also. That's available for lots of users. Characteristics of a device is the last panel. Here we capture the device characteristics such as single use. We talked about the production identifiers on the label. This is where you tell us, yes, the production identifier on the label is lot or batch. No, we don't have serial number on the label. Yes, we have expiration date on the label. No, we don't have manufacturing date or the donation identification number on the label. So if you see, we don't actually collect the actual production identifier. We just collect what is on the label, and you tell us what they are. Latex information, prescription status of the device, and MRI safety information are some of the characteristics we capture, along with the size of the device, storage and handling information of the device, and sterilization. So that rounds out the three categories for a device record. So now time to get into the nitty-gritty about how the DI record works in the GUDID. So to start off, some key concepts. The new DI trigger attribute. So this is extremely important to understand and manage on your end. So we have several GUDID attributes, out of which we have chosen 11, and we call them the new DI trigger attributes. So what are these? These are attributes that when you change them, they no longer represent the same device. And we say, therefore, they require a new device identifier. The best examples that make sense to me are for single use. If you say a device is a single-use device and you provided the new device identifier, you can come back a year later and say, this device is no longer a single-use device. You can use it more than once. If that's the case, then the way you use that device, how you manage that device changes, therefore it's no longer the same device. Similarly, if you say a device is packaged as a sterile device, if you package sterile, then the way you use it, how you manage it is different versus the device that's not packaged as a sterile device. So you can change these attributes and keep the same device identifier. So we have 11 of those, and those are available in the data elements reference table on the GUDID website. So definitely understand them and review them, because it's important for you to manage that because that impacts how you manage your DI record. And you will see that as we go through this presentation. The next important concept to understand is the DI record publish date. We briefly talked about this earlier. It determines when your record actually gets published. That means when is it actually going to be available via public search. Forgetting for a moment that public search is disabled, so even if you were to publish your record right now, nobody can see it. But when we do enable public search and open up GUDID data for public use, this will become a very important date, and it will determine when your record is available for the public to see. Additionally, the DI record publish date also drives another important concept, which is called the grace period. So the grace period starts the day after the DI record publish date, and it ends after 7 calendar days. So what's so great about the grace period? The importance here is during the grace period, all the record attributes in a DI record are all editable except for your publish date. After the grace period, the new DI trigger attributes, which we just talked about, we lock them down. They're no longer editable. And quite a bit of the other attributes also go into some edit restrictions. So you may say, why are you putting all these restrictions in place? Why is the complication? And the main reason is we want the DI record information to be dependable. If you put a record out there and you say this record is published and somebody comes and accesses that record today, we want that record to be the same if they come back to it 30 days later. But if they come back to it 30 days later and everything's changed, this information is not dependable. And that's the reason for having the grace period, and that's the reason for locking these new DI trigger attributes. So to recap, you publish a record. There is a grace period of 7 calendar days, starts the day after the publish date. And during that grace period, you can edit any attribute you want for your DI record except for the publish date. And after the grace period, those new DI trigger attributes are no longer editable, and some of the other attributes will have limited editing capability. And if you look at the data elements reference table that I mentioned earlier, that provides you more detail on all the new, which are the new DI trigger attributes, what type of editing is allowed for which attribute. So definitely use that data elements reference table. Additionally, the edits you make to a DI record and the submission option you use to initially enter that record is also important. We'll talk more about this a little later in the presentation. But for now, the focus is to understand the grace period and what you can do during the 7-day grace period and what happens after the 7-day grace period. Moving along to now the DI record lifecycle. So the DI record lifecycle is nothing but the 3 DI record states that you see on the screen and the business rules that are associated to each of those DI record states. Now, the DI record states are there is a draft DI state, an unpublished DI record state, and a published DI record state. So I'm going to go through each one of those device record states and talk about them in detail. So let's go on to the draft DI record. So the draft DI record is when you first come into GUDID and you want to create a new record, this is how you would start out. It's a great way to learn the system, if you will. It's a draft, as the term says it. It's only available for the web interface submission option only. We talked about the 2 submission options. This draft DI record state is not available as the HL7 SPL option. So the draft state, you don't have to pass any business rules. You can pretty much use this option to come in, just get a feel for how the DI record works, enter your record, and you don't have to pass any business rules. You can resave it, the same record as a draft, even if you were to pass all the business rules. Maybe you're just testing it out. And the records will stay in the database for 180 days. If after 180 days of inactivity, if they're still sitting there, then we just purge them because we don't want, draft records sitting there in eternity. However, if you enter a record, you save it, and then you come back to it after 30 days and you do some tweak to it, resave it, the 180-day clock restarts all over again. So it's 180 days of complete inactivities when we purge it. And these records are, of course, not available for public search. It's only visible to the user who created that record. So it's not visible to anyone but the user who creates it. So moving on, here is a screenshot of the draft DI record, and I will show this to you when we do the show and tell part of this presentation. So here is the draft DI record. You see the device information panel. So you can save this as a draft. You can delete the draft, or you can do review. Review is what will run all the business rules on the attributes, or you can cancel the record. And if you were to say review the record and you pass all the business rules, in that case, you still can resave it as a draft. You don't have to submit the record. Or if you choose to, you can submit it to GUDID, and we'll talk about what happens to submit in just a minute, and or continue to further edit that record or cancel out. So those are the main actions available for a draft DI. So to talk about editing the draft DI, it's unlimited editing. You edit as many times as you want. All attributes are editable. Nothing is locked. The key thing to remember, though, is can only be entered via the web interface and can only be edited via the GUDID web interface. This is not something you have as an option, as a DI record state option via the HL7 SPL submission option. Okay, so now we've created a draft DI record, let's say, but we want to understand how to move this draft DI. Think of it as step one of creating a DI record. How do we move it to the next state, the unpublished or the published state? So a draft DI can go from its draft state directly to the unpublished state. And to do that, the business rules must pass, and you must submit the record to the system. And the published date, if you remember, the most important published date attribute must be in the future. It has to be greater than today. However, you can take a draft DI record, you pass the business rules, you submit it to the database, and if the published date is today, or if the published date is today, the record will get immediately published. So a draft DI record can either move to unpublished state or the published state. So let's now go into the unpublished DI record and talk about that. Now, a DI record that has passed all the GUDID business rules, you hit review, and if your review passes, you get this nice little indicator telling you that the device information reviewed successfully. That means all the business rules have been passed, and then you submit the record. And if that record has a DI record published date in the future, more greater than today, then the record is an unpublished DI record. Now, unpublished DI records are not available via public search. And, however, they're visible to the labeler data entry users who are assigned those labeler DUNS. And if you are familiar with the GUDID account process and the user roles, you would know what I'm talking about here. The LDE user would have assigned labeler DUNS, and all the LDEs who have those labeler DUNS will be able to view unpublished records for that labeler DUNS. And we, the FDA staff, can also review any unpublished DI records that you may have created and submitted to GUDID, and these records can be copied. We allow copying on records which have passed business rules, which means they have passed review, mainly because we don't want you to copy that data. That's why we don't allow copy on draft records. So here is a screenshot that shows you that a new record has been created. The published date has been set to the future, to 2030. So it's an unpublished DI record. Now, this record, you can submit it. It will be submitted as an unpublished record. Again, you can choose to keep it in the draft mode if you like, or you can continue to edit it. So let's say I hit submit, and when I hit submit, it will say your record was submitted successfully. And because the published date was in 2030, this saved as an unpublished DI record. So that's how the unpublished DI works. And the unpublished DI record, once it's submitted, the system will send you a notification and it will tell you that the database record was been submitted successfully, and it will provide you the device identifier number or device identifier there. So let's talk about editing an unpublished DI record. Again, editing is unlimited here. It must pass business rules, however, after each edit. So if you made a change and that changed the attribute, we still want to run business rules on that to make sure that you can still pass the business rules we have in place. So you have to hit review to make sure it passes review. I do want to talk a little bit about the Div2 submission options and how editing a record is impacted here. Now, if you enter the record via the web, and it's an unpublished record, you cannot edit that record via the HL7 SPL submission option if it's an unpublished DI. So if you entered an unpublished DI via the web, you cannot edit that record via HL7 SPL. However, if you enter a record via SPL, an unpublished DI via SPL, you may edit that record via the web interface. Now, what this does, though, is it provides the potential for inconsistencies between your source system and what's in GUDID. Because if you pulled your data for your device record for HL7 SPL option from your source system, and you sent that XML file, we loaded it, and then you log in via the web interface option and you made a change, but you didn't cascade that change down into your source system, that's where the inconsistencies may come about. So we just want to draw your attention that there is flexibility in the editing at this time, but again, it's your responsibility to make sure that your record keeping is up to date. We'll talk more about this and our overall recommendation for editing, but for now, just note that web-entered records cannot be edited via SPL in the unpublished state. SPL-entered records may be edited via the web interface in the unpublished state. Moving on, so we have an unpublished DI record. Now, how do we move it to a published DI state? So moving from unpublished DI record state to published DI record state can happen automatically. There is a nightly job that checks the published date of every DI record in the system. If the published date is today, the date that the job runs, then the record will flip from unpublished to published automatically. Now, also don't forget that draft records can go directly to published DI records if the published date is equal to today. So again, to reiterate, they automatically move from unpublished to published state, but no email notification is sent to the user. So if you submitted a web record and you put in tomorrow as the unpublished date and you submitted it as an unpublished record, tomorrow night when our batch job runs in the night, it will move that record from unpublished state to published state, but you will not get an email letting you know that that happened. If you send an SPL record that's unpublished and set the published date to tomorrow, in that case, you will get an acknowledgement saying that your submission was successfully loaded, but when the record goes from unpublished to published again, you will not get another acknowledgement. Once the record is published, of course, it will be available for public search. So let's talk about the published DI record then. A published DI record is a record that has passed all GUDID business rules. So it has passed. You've hit the review button, and you've gotten this green bar telling you device information has been reviewed successfully. Following that, you have hit the submit button, and the published date is in the past, or it's today, and the record then is published record. Now, a published record, if you recall, we talked about grace period, we talked about new DI trigger attributes, all of those things come into play. The system tells you here, when I submitted this record on July 19th, it told me in the test database, the grace period is 1 day. It told me you have until July 20th to update any fields in this record that would otherwise trigger a new DI to be created. So it's telling me what the grace period is. So when you submit it, it will give you the date, and it will tell you, here is your grace period, after which you will not be able to edit the new DI trigger attributes. So the grace period edit rules kick in, and anytime you edit a record that may have passed business rules, you must pass the business rules all over again. You must pass hit review, make sure you get this green bar before you can move on with that edit. We'll talk more about the edits in just a moment. But just remember that any record that's published is available for public search. Not all attributes are available via public search. Only the publicly releasable attributes are visible. And for a list of publicly releasable attributes, please refer to the data elements reference table on our website. Pretty much, I would say 90% of the attributes are available for the public to view. There are very few attributes that they actually withhold. If you take a DI record, if you take a device out of commercial distribution, you would come and update the DI record. If you recall, you would put a commercial distribution end date. You would populate that. When you populate that field, on that date, we will change the status of that record to say not in commercial distribution. At that point, though, remember the record will still be a published record. It will still be available via public search, but the public will know that this device is no longer in commercial distribution. All right, so just to show you a couple of screenshots from the database, here is a published record. The date that we published this was July 19th. The system will show that this is published, and the functions available to you is you can copy this record, you can edit this record, and you can cancel out. Later on in the demo, I will show you the locked fields. When you do click edit, you will not be able to edit every record, every attribute. The new DI trigger attributes, of course, will be locked, and you cannot edit those. So once you hit the submit, it says device information submitted successfully. It will give you the grace period, and you will see that the record is a published record. And again, you will get an email notification. It will tell you that the database record has been submitted. And again, the email will also provide you the grace period to let you know what your grace period is and how you can edit during that grace period. Now let's talk about editing. With editing, there are two things I want to call your attention. One thing to note is the attribute editing. What are the attributes that are editable? The second thing to keep in mind is the submission option you use to submit your record and what you can do with regards to editing via the submission option. So two categories, editable attributes and submission options. So let's talk about editing the attributes first, and now we're also, to add on a layer on top of that, is the time period. So we have to talk about during the grace period. So you've just submitted a record, let's say yesterday. The record is still in the 7-day grace period, so what can you do now? So in that grace period, all the attributes are editable except for the published date. You already put the published date in, that's why it's a published record, and that's why it's in the grace period. So you can edit any attribute you want. Just remember, you have to pass the business rules each time you make an edit, and the only attribute you cannot edit is the published date. Now let's go talk about the submission options. So if you enter a record via the web, and it's a published DI record, and it's during the grace period, you cannot edit it via the SPL option. If you enter the record via SPL, however, you can edit that record via the web. I mentioned this before, and I have the same wordings here, that if you enter a record via the SPL initially, you are pulling all the device information from your source system. You publish that record, you come back and a user comes in and makes changes on the web. If you don't cascade those changes to your source system, you basically end up with an issue where there are inconsistencies. So remember that overall, SPL provides you great flexibility. You enter it via SPL, you can edit it via the web. And the time period, again, we're talking about is the record is published and it's in the grace period. Okay. So now let's talk about a published record after the grace period. So the grace period has passed. Again, we want to talk about two aspects. One is the attribute editing. The other one is the submission option that you initially came in. So let's look at the attributes. When you look at the attribute editing, after the grace period, this is when we are going to lock down some attributes for editing. The new DI trigger attributes cannot be edited. And some of the other attributes, we lock that down. Also, limited editing of certain other attributes. For example, I believe we will ask you may add pre-market submission numbers, but you cannot delete an existing pre-market submission number. So that's an example of limited editing of certain attributes. So that's the attribute issue. Now let's talk about submission option. Now, initial entry via the web interface, you cannot edit it at the moment via SPL. However, we are planning an enhancement to allow this capability. We don't have timelines to share at the moment, but we're working on this actively to provide this flexibility to users. If you initially enter via SPL, you may edit it via the web interface. Again, the same disclaimer about inconsistencies that I've been repeating throughout. So I just want to go back and recap again both the edit rules here for published DI records since it's so complicated. So for a published DI record, 2 time periods to keep in mind, during grace and after grace. So during grace period, again, for each one of these, what are the attributes you can edit and how does the submission option come into play with editing? With the attribute edits, during the grace period, you can edit all attributes except the published date. As far as submission option goes, web interface entered records cannot be edited via SPL during the grace period. SPL entered records can be edited via the web. Now, same thing after grace period. Two ways to think about this. One is the attribute editing. The other one is the submission option impact. As far as attributes goes, after grace period, new DI trigger attributes are not editable and limited editing of other attributes. And for submission option, if you enter via the web, you cannot edit via SPL. However, we are working to provide this capability. And if you enter via SPL, you may edit via the web. So overall, to recap this whole editing, our recommendation is for you to please use the same submission option that you used for initial data entry for all edits to a DI record. Now, in an earlier webinar, I believe we may have provided conflicting information about this, and we apologize. Over time, as we have been working with the system, we noticed certain inconsistencies in the way we had it on our back end, which resulted in us locking down the web interface. So at the moment, if you enter a DI record via the web, you cannot edit that record via SPL. But based on user feedback and requests for additional flexibility, we do realize that it's important to provide you the capability to manage your DI records via both options. So what we've decided is to allow editing of web-entered DI records via SPL after the grace period. And that's what I had in my earlier slide. And we're working on that, and when we have more information, we'll come out and share that with you. But again, if you enter a record via SPL and you edit it via web, that has potential to introduce inconsistencies. And we will note all these and come out with a technical information document that will sort of show you the what the flexibility provides and what also the perils of flexibility, if you will. We'll highlight those so you are aware. And again, we're doing this to provide great flexibility to you in managing your records as your business needs demand. But just note that our recommendation is that we want you to the extent possible, use the submission option and stick to that submission option for all edits to that DI record. All right, that's a lot about editing. I'm sure you're wondering, how much more do we have to go? I have one little bit to talk about editing. So we'll finish that, and then hopefully we can give you a little breather. So the grace period is over. We talked about locking the record down, but oh God, what do? You have to edit a new DI trigger attribute. A mistake has happened, and you've only discovered it after the grace period passed. What do? Are you, in the water and there's nothing you can do? No, of course not. There is always something that can be done about anything, and you can do that here also. And you can edit a new DI trigger attribute after the grace period. However, we expect this to be an extremely rare occurrence. So that's very important. We want you to realize that before you publish a DI record, please make sure your data is accurate and it is ready to be published. But again, for those rare situations, you need to contact the UDI help desk if you do want to make an edit. we will review your request, and what we are going to do is we'll change that DI record from the published after grace period state to an unpublished state. If you remember from an earlier unpublished state discussion, that means you can edit, unlimited editing is available to you. You can make the edits you need to make, and then you will republish that record. But please don't abuse this opportunity and, contact us for hundreds of records. Again, we expect this to be an extremely rare occurrence. I think that's all I had about editing. So we'll move on now to a new concept. I wish I could put a nice cartoon or a joke here for you, but I didn't. So talking about copy. So for those of you who plan to use the web interface only, may be interested in this. This is only applicable to the ones, to the GUDID web interface option. So published and unpublished records, if you recall, have passed all the business rules, and therefore we consider them to be good quality records. Those records may be copied. So if you see any published or unpublished record, you will notice copy as a function that is available to you. If you hit copy, the system is going to tell you this got copied successfully. It will bring over all the attributes from your prior record except for the primary DI, because that has to be unique, but it will also not bring over packages. And when we programmed this, we were not sure if package information would be similar enough and if it was worth for us to bring it forward. We have chosen not to, but if you feel this is important to bring it forward, send us feedback to the help desk, and we will consider that for a future enhancement. So that's the copy function, and once you copy, the record can be saved as a draft, or the record again has to pass business rules before it can be submitted. So that's the copy. I think that covers up our DI record lifecycle discussion. Just to recap, there are 3 DI record states. There is a draft DI record, unpublished DI, and published DI record states. We've gone through the functions associated with each, some of the business rules that drive each state, and additionally, we've also talked about editing, which I know, as I mentioned before, there was some confusion out there based on our prior webinar information that was provided. And what we hope is that we have provided additional clarity around the edit rules surrounding DI records today. And this picture, I definitely don't plan to go through this, but this is in our GUDID guidance document, which is has a wealth of information for you on all the DI record lifecycle state and the functions. But this basically shows you the functions available as a DI record passed through the different DI record states in GUDID. So if you are a flowchart type of person, you might be interested to go through this. So moving forward, let's talk about device packages. I showed you before how in the screenshot, and I'll show you again another screenshot. But in GUDID, device packages don't get their own records. What they do is they are part of the same DI record as in the base package. So in this example, here is a catheter that is a base package, has a primary DI of 1001. If you take this base package and you put it inside a box, and you put 30 of these in a box, and you give that box a UDI of 2001, and then you take that box and you put 12 of those boxes in a case, and then you give that case 3001. The 2000 and 3001 will just be part of this base package record, and I've tried to show that here. Here is a primary DI, and the package DI will start in the bottom here. Package example 1 has 5, and it has 5 of the device identifier package DI overview. So it is basically saying I have 5 of the base package inside this package example 1. And then I took this package and I put 10 of those in package example 2. So here I'm showing you in package example 2 the quantity inside this 10, and it has 10 of this package example 1. So the contains DI package is telling me what is inside my package. So that's how packages work. So these two don't get a separate DI record of their own, but they become part of this base package record, and that really does help link up the base package to what's inside all of these packages. All right, I think that's all I had about presentation from a slide perspective. It is time to do a little bit of a show and tell for you. Okay, I'm not sure what that is. All right, I'm going to switch on and move over to the GUDID to do a quick demo for you. So here is the main GUDID screen. I hope several of you have seen it. I am logging into the test system as noted by this red banner. Please always be aware of this. If you have a test account and a production account in GUDID, if you enter records into the test system, as we clearly say here, these submissions made to this system will not meet your GUDID submission requirements. So be careful if you are a web interface user and you're entering records. Make sure you use the correct GUDID to enter your records. So since I'm demoing, will be using the test system. I'm going to log in as a LDE user. All right, so this is my main screen for the label or data entry user, who would be the person who can enter records. So when you come in, the label or data entry user can create a new DI, they can enter draft DIs, or they can look at all the DIs that they've already submitted. So if I were to hit create new DI, it will bring me the blank screen, which will allow me, and if you remember, I showed you the 3 panels. And here are the 3 panels that we talked about, device information, status, and characteristics. To save time, what I've done is I've already created a draft, so I'm going to start with the draft record. Cancel out of here, and I'll say go to my draft record. So I have a draft DI example that I've created. So here is my draft DI record. Again, it has the 3 panels, and I've filled them all out. I'll just show you the information that I've entered. So if you look here, I've put in a future published date. So I can resave this as a draft, as I said, and I can keep it in the draft state as long as I want. I can delete it, or I can review it. At this point, I'm going to say, I'm ready to submit this. Let me go ahead and review. It says there is an error. What is the error? This is part of passing all the business rules. So this is where the system is saying, do you have all the information you're supposed to, and is the information that you provided, is it correct? So it tells me that I did not choose single use. Single use is a required field, and I didn't enter it, so I'm going to say, yes, this is a single-use device. And then I'm going to say, now can I please pass review? And the system said it reviewed successfully. At this point, my options are to resave the draft, I can submit the draft, or I can edit the draft. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to resave it as a draft because I may want somebody in my organization to review it and say, oh, before you publish it or unpublish it, I want someone to review it. So now let's go back and re-pick up the draft and assume that whoever in the organization has reviewed it, and they tell me, well, you know, I think we need to make some changes, and just to keep the demo more meaningful, I'm going to change the name and say I'm going to change it from draft to unpublished. I'm going to hit review, because every time you make a change, you have to pass business rules, and it hit review, and it said it successfully. Now, if I were to submit this, I know this record is going to say unpublished, mainly because my published date is in 2030. So I am going to hit submit at this point, and it said the device information was submitted successfully, and if you see here, it's showing me that the record status is unpublished. Now let's open up that unpublished record to show you the copy feature. See, the copy feature is now available. It was not available in the draft state, mainly because it's not a validated record. So at this point, I can copy this if I wanted to. So I'm going to hit copy. And when I hit copy, the primary DI is empty. I need to enter a new DI, and none of the package information got copied. However, I don't want to save this, so I'm going to cancel at this point. And what I next want to show you is take the unpublished, and I want to show you how I can, if I choose to, I can publish this record right now. So I'm going to hit edit, because I want to remember the unpublished DI record can be edited as many times as you want, and all attributes are editable. So I'm going to say, I want to edit this record right now. And today is the, go to the correct year. So it's today, and I want to publish it today. And I'm going to say review. If the device information reviewed successfully, here is the DI record publish date, and if I submit this, the record has been submitted, and if you see, it's giving me the grace period. Because this is a test system, we've set the grace period to be 1 day, so it's telling me I have until July 22nd to update any fields in this record that would otherwise create a new DI trigger. So now I would like to pull this record back. Now, if you remember, this record is published. It shows you it's published. Now, this is during the grace period because I just published it. So let's see what happens when I want to edit this record. So if I want to edit this record, I can't edit the published date because the published date is not editable, but I can edit some of the other fields. I can edit the device description field, and if I hit review, it said it's reviewed successfully, and I can submit this record. Now let me pull up a record that I published a while ago, which has passed, just to show you editing this record is different, that there are many attributes. For example, if I want to edit the single-use attribute, I can edit the single-use because this is a new DI trigger. I also showed you example about device being packaged as a sterile device. I can't edit this record either because these are new DI trigger attributes, and this record has been published way past in July 14th, and therefore this is outside of the grace period or after the grace period, therefore I can't edit all the records. So that's, in a nutshell, what I wanted to show all of you. Now I'm going to flip back over to the presentation. So we completed the show and tell. So let's wrap it up. September 24th is not too far away. We only have 64 days and 9 weeks. We are all getting ready on our end, and I'm sure you are also. And the current status is we are only accepting submissions from Class 3 medical device labelers and labelers of devices licensed under the PHS Act. We have 136 production accounts in GUDID, and as of yesterday, we have 103 records that are published and close to 1,400 records that are in the overall total number of records. So what should you do if you haven't gotten started already? If you're a Class 3 labeler and listening, I hope you know most of the information I've talked about, and I've just sort of confirmed or reiterated what you already knew. Definitely make sure you review the tons of materials that we've put out there, the guidance document which we've finalized. The user manual actually has good screenshots for you from the database and walks through several of the functions we talked about today. The data elements reference table, which I mentioned, has a list of all the attributes, the edit rules, what's public, what's not public, whether it's a new DI trigger or not. and several helpful data entry pointers for you to know. So definitely use that as your Bible. Make sure you identify and obtain GMDN codes for your devices, identify listing number for your devices, and most importantly, I didn't talk much about this, don't forget data quality. Data quality is a very important component of our GUDID program. This being a brand new database, we want to make sure the data inside GUDID is dependable, reliable, and accurate. So we ask that you bake in data quality as you go along, and we are here to assist you. If you enter records, we can review them and provide you a data quality feedback that you can then use to incorporate into your source system. Definitely reach out to us about that. Test via your submission option. If you want to test your records, if you are doing a web interface entry only, remember I talked about draft records, which can be used as a learning option, if you will. If you're doing HL7 SPL, you have to complete testing, and then you are ready to submit your production records. So HL7 SPL, I mentioned that we are going to have a recorded training that we will be posting on our website on the process for SPL submission, but at a very high level, you need to register with the FDA Electronic Submissions Gateway. You need to complete the gateway testing. You need to request a Test GUDID account, complete the GUDID testing, and then you can obtain a production account and submit the DI records. And information on this is also available on our website. Look under the HL7 SPL option. And as far as DI record submission itself goes, we recommend you start by submitting your records as unpublished records, mainly because of the edit rules that go into play. You work with us on your data quality review. You submit them as unpublished. We can give you the data quality feedback, which will then enable you to make any edits as necessary, and then you can publish your DI records. The system status, important for you. If you haven't done this already, please take a moment to sign up to receive GUDID email alerts. So we do post scheduled downtimes on the GUDID website. Look under the GUDID system status page, and we also send you email alerts also. Occasionally, as can be expected, there are unscheduled downtimes, sometimes informed by you. If that's the case, then we do our utmost to bring the system back up as soon as possible, and we do post that on the website the minute we hear about it. So how do you contact us? For ESG questions, if you are an HL7 SPL submitter, we ask that you contact the ESG help desk at the email address. For all other inquiries, you contact us via the help desk. I know several of you know us intimately via our help desk. If you don't know, then you get onto our website. There is a very simple web form that you fill out. Once you hit the submit question, it will come to us and becomes a case in our help desk tool, and then our help desk manager will assign case to folks in the team, and we will then send the response back to you. You can ask follow-up questions by responding to that email, and it will just append the case on our end, and we make sure that we get back to you in a timely fashion. We have heard people telling us that it's gone to the spam folder, so if you think you haven't heard from us, just take a quick look in your spam and make sure you do whatever you need to unspam us so that it comes to you. I think that's it. I've talked a lot. We'll stop now and take questions from you.
Yes, thank you. At this time, we will begin the question and answer session. To ask a question, you may please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. Please unmute your phone and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. To withdraw your question, please press *2. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. One moment for our first question. Okay, it looks like our first question is coming from Mr. Kumar Potula. Your question is up at this time.
Yeah, I would like to know the GMDN PT code and FDA PT code and FDA listing number is all three, how they are related.
So the GMDN code is, as I mentioned, it's a high level, allows us to group similar devices at a very high level. The GMDN code can be obtained by the GMDN agency. The FDA PT code is a temporary solution that we've created to fulfill the promise that was made in the UDI final rule that the GMDN codes would be made available for all labelers to be accessed. So what we've done is we've mapped the GMDN codes. We've generated internal codes for them, which we're calling them FDA preferred term code. They are a 4-letter code that we have come up with, which anyone who has login privilege to GUDID can access, and you can search for a preferred term, and you will get an FDA preferred term code, which you can then populate in lieu of the GMDN code in a DI record. Again, this is meant to be a temporary solution and not a replacement, a permanent replacement for GMDN. So we encourage labelers to go to the GMDN agency to obtain a GMDN code. So that's the relationship between those two. The listing number is a number that's assigned by the FDA. There is a regulation under the registration listing regulation. All devices must be establishments must be registered, and the devices must be listed prior to getting commercially distributed. And the listing number may contain multiple device records. So a single listing may map to multiple PI records. So I don't know how to explain the link between listing and GMDN except to say that the GMDN and the FDA preferred term code are both higher level categorization of devices.
I have another question then. FDA PT code and GMDN PT code, either one we have to enter, right? Not both.
Correct. Right. We wouldn't want you to enter, duplicate codes. So if you were to give us a GMDN code, we wouldn't want you to give a FDA PT code for that same GMDN code. So either or.
Okay. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Ayeska Felice. Your question is up at this time.
Hello. So we have a couple questions. Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So the first thing is I just want some clarification. When I read the final guidance, there was something, the definition, I'm just going to go to page 5, where it says that a UDI is required to appear on the label of every medical device and every device package. So we got confused about the terms.
You got confused about what, sorry?
About the terms. So
okay.
Can you clarify what does that mean?
Clarify that the UDI is required to appear on the label of every medical device and every medical device package unless accepted?
Correct.
What are you what clarification are you looking for?
So when you say every medical device, do you mean the actual device has to be labeled with the UDI?
That's right.
So the actual device, not the label of the device?
No. Good afternoon, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is Anita Rayner. No, I'm looking at page 5 right here. This refers to the requirement in the UDI reg in 21 CFR 801.3. The UDI is required to appear on the label of the finished medical device and every device package for that finished medical device. But on the label, direct marking of devices is something entirely different and something that Indira covered for database purposes very briefly, but that's not what this refers to.
Okay, perfect. So it means just on the label of any finished device and any configuration that I may have for that device.
If it's a finished device.
Correct. Okay.
So following to that question, what I'm concerned that we have a part number A, that part number A, it contains 4 of part B. But we never sell part B. So always we are selling the package of 4 as a part A. So when I'm going to enter the data in the GUDID, I should enter only one data record for part A. Device count will be 4, and I'm going to have the unit of use DI for Part B. Is that right? Or I should also have another data entry record for Part B as well?
We could provide you a general answer, but to be honest, it would be better if you send us the actual device example that you are referring to, so we can give you the correct response for your particular device, because generalities we find only go so far. When you get into that level of detail, it's better we understand the whole product correctly. So if you don't mind sending it as a help desk question, we will make sure we get back to you.
I already opened the ticket because I found this as an inconsistency, and when I was just trying in draft DI, so I started with entering the Part B DI as a primary DI and continue the rest of these UDI characteristics. Then I came back and I entered for the second time as a second data record, this time for the main package one, which always contains of those 4 Part B. So the system accepted both of them, and I opened the ticket 2 days ago. So the system accepted, and I have 2 data record as a draft DI. Now, what had happened, then I wanted to test out the system. This time, I was entering that vice versa. It means that I started with entering the Part A, which is a package of 4, and put the device count as a 4 and the unit of use for Part B. When for the second time I was going to enter now that Part B as a primary DI, the system bounced back and said, we already have a record of that, so you can't do it. So I'm not sure exactly what's the true. Should we include 2 data records? I already opened the ticket, so you can see it from Thoratech.
Okay. If you already opened a ticket, great. Thank you. We will check that. I would just ask that if you have not gotten a request from us for a specific example, we may be sending that to you as a response back, asking for a label example to help us out. But in general, can you explain if Part B is a finished device?
Part B is a package of 4 finished devices.
So what you mean by finished device is if we sell it by itself?
Correct. And that it can, yes, it's properly labeled.
Yeah, we are not selling Part B, but we are selling Part A, which is a package of 4 of Part B.
Oh, I see. Okay, so finished device is basically a device that any device or accessory that is capable of functioning on its own. So you're saying Part B is not a finished device, but Part A is a finished device and it has 4 of Part B.
Yes, so another example, like for example, we have a battery. We always sell a set of 4 batteries. So those 4 batteries is in the package of as a Part A.
I think it may be best to take this via the help desk and assist you that way. If you don't mind, and thank you for opening the ticket, if you don't mind and send us additional information about the device instead of just referring to it as Part A or Part B, I think it would help us to know exactly what device you're talking about. So if you can send that information to that case, it will append your case and we'll then be able to review it.
So I have a following question that just general. If we are going to include a UDI label on a product that we are not selling it on its own, do we still have to provide all this characteristic and GUDID attributes and enter them in the GUDID?
I guess if it's a finished device, then yes. If it's a finished device that is suitable for use or capable of functioning by itself, then yes, you would need to have the UDI based on the final rule.
It is a finish, but is not going to be function on its own. So it goes within the other 3 components in a convenience kit. So we have placed a UDI on each of those packages, but all these 4 boxes are sitting within the convenience kit. So the thing is that those individual inside, it has a UDI, but not necessarily functioning on its own.
We'll have to, unfortunately, those are hard to answer in a forum like this. they are suitable for you to send as a help desk question where we can actually spend some time, look at it, and provide you an appropriate response. I'm sorry we can't give you answer at this time on that.
Okay, so for manufacturing date, we have the manufacturing date on the label, but is not part of the PI of a UDI label. So should we say as a PI on the label in GUDID, should we say yes?
And this is Anita Rayner. Have you received an exception for that from our help desk?
No, this is just my question right now from the slide that you guys providing it to us. My question is that in the UDI, in the human readable one of that barcode, we have the FDI, and then the PI, the manufacture date is not part of the UDI and human readable one. However, we have the manufacture date sitting and listed and stated on the label. So when we are entering the data in GUDID, should we say yes for manufacturing date or no?
Okay, thank you. Our next question is going to come from Mr. Mike Barthorpe. Mr. Barthorpe, your question is up at this time.
I'm sorry. We just one second. Just to go back to the person who was just asking us a question. We're sorry. We'll have to get back to you on that. If you want to open a help desk on that, please do. We will provide you a response to that as well. I apologize. We don't have a response at the moment.
Okay, Mr. Barthorpe, your question is up at this time.
They will be quite simple and straightforward. In the device, I think it's in the characteristics. There is the contact email address and the contact phone number, which at the moment are coupled. So if you enter one, you have to enter the other. I raised it as a ticket, and I was told that the plan was to decouple those two fields so that you could enter a phone number but leave the email address blank. Can you tell me when his plans to go live?
We don't have a timeline for that. It is definitely on our list to address, but at the moment we don't have a timeline that I can share with you. However, I can draw you to the data elements reference table where we specify how you should handle situations where you may just have either the phone number or the email, but not both.
Sure. Yeah. My company is related, and it actually relates to the size of the version model number field. I understand that, again, this is planned to increase it from 40 characters to 80 characters. Same question. Do you have a timeline for implementation of that?
Yes, that we do have a timeline. We hope to have something implemented next month. I hesitate to give you an exact date, but it is we are planning to have an enhancement out to accommodate 80 characters for version or model number and catalog number, and we hope to have that out sometime end of August.
Correct. Okay. Small questions. Can you permit me an additional one? When you talked about the draft record, you said for use of review, but my understanding was that draft was only visible to the person that entered it. So how could anybody else review it?
That's a good question. You got me there. You're correct. You cannot review. Actually, that's another enhancement request that we have received from users where they would like to have the draft DI records to be visible to folks beyond just the user who created it, just to facilitate review. So you are correct. I misspoke there, and draft DI records can only be viewed by the user who created it and cannot be used for review. Thank you.
Okay. In that case, can I just squeeze one? When you publish a record and the 7 days, is that as soon as it's published?
Yes.
So you could and the public,
Yes.
and then you check completely different, and they come back and see it completely different.
That's right.
Okay, and that's okay, is it?
You know,
because you did say about not to see records and then they be changed so that they're different, and yet we're allowed to do that.
I think that, you know, we had to drive the, at the moment anyway, the way we're driving visibility to the public is based off of the published date and the fact that the record is considered to be in the published status. We may have to do some messaging when we do open up the public search to, you know, make sure folks are aware of this idea of grace period and that the record could change and that the records are locked after the record passes the grace period. So that's some, you know, messaging and communication that we have to work when we do enable public search. But at the moment, the model that we've put in place is to lock the records down so they cannot be in a continuous state of change, and after 7 days that they are as stable as hopefully they can be.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Questions?
No problem. Thank you for your excellent questions.
Our final question in the queue is coming from Mr. Anil Ratu. Mr. Ratu, your question is up at this time.
Yeah, hi there. I only do have one question. I'd like to know regarding the medical device reporting. We actually do the annual medical device reports by the ESG. And as part of the conforming amendments changes, we also have to submit the UDI by the ESG form. Is there a guide how to set this up? I think there's a great guide for
Mr. Ratu, can you speak up? We're not able to. We're losing you.
Sorry, is that better?
A little bit.
Bear with me just a sec. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so my question was regarding to the annual, the MDRs, the medical device reporting. We currently submit those via the ESG. Now, we also have to, from September 24th, submit the UDI as part of this. Is there a guidance how to set this up?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
Is there any information available how to set up the medical device reporting, including the UDI?
Oh, so you're asking about guidance on submitting UDIs as part of your medical device reporting?
Correct, yes.
Hi, everybody. This is Anita Rayner again. Yeah, we recognize that there are several moving parts going on here at this point, the conforming amendments with respect to Part 803, medical device reporting, the implementation timelines for the EMDR final rule, which goes into effect in August of 2015, and the recognition that because our internal systems are changing, that there will be some difficulty in actually or could potentially be some difficulty in submitting the UDI electronically because our internal systems are set up. So what we're asking companies to do is notify us of that difficulty in terms of being able to include UDIs on MDRs for Class 3 products, and we're addressing that internally with our UDI policy staff, and we'll be able to get back to you on that.
Okay, so just to confirm, I got that right. You said EMDR is not required to submit the UDI until August 2015.
No, I did not say that. We're looking at reasonable timeframes for that, and that's why I asked that if you would let us know about that, and then our MDR policy group is coming up with a policy on that in terms of the recognition that the EMDR systems are not fully capable of accepting the UDIs. So we're asking companies to notify us, particularly Class 3 companies, to notify us because of the September 24th deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, are those the end of the questions?
That appears to be all questions in queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. So this is Anna Staten again. I want to thank everyone today for your questions and for your attention. If you have any further questions, feel free to send them to the EDI